Yes, Mayor. Please rise. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving to the agenda, my suggestion I want to hear from you all is, it seems to me we have gone back and forth to quite a bit. You know, having it be in public.
Thank you. Thanks. I'll start over. We have talked about this issue many times, and the idea of having a public forum seems, in my mind, to be warranted. So I would suggest to take our closed session agenda and move it to an open forum agenda to be determined by the city manager.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Some of what we need to discuss is conduct that occurred in closed session. And we cannot legally just start talking about it, although some of us believe that we can legally talk about illegal conduct that happened in closed session. We don't have that permission, so we need to go into closed session. We need to discuss the ramifications of a waiver, what the extent of that waiver would be, and actually whether we need legal advice as to whether it's a good idea to waive closed session.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the purpose of today's meeting, to talk about what we can do legally.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then,
Well, can we have some advice?
If the consideration is to waive privilege in a closed session, I recommend discussing that in closed session
Agreed.
first. If the consideration is other issues, then it may depend on what the other issues are. But if the focus is on whether or not it's wise to waive closed session privilege, that should be a closed session discussion first, because you can't have a full and fair discussion of it without inherently waiving the privilege. Hence, a closed session discussion first.
I see the point, and I'm sensing your hesitancy as well.
no,
Okay.
yes, it is, I mean, it is the law. It's protocol that we go into closed session to discuss whether or not we can bring it into open session.
Yes.
And that was my intention today
Oh, great.
in coming here, was actually to have that conversation in closed session. But I'm glad that we're bringing it out into open session so that the intention is here and
Great.
it's on the floor.
I'm happy for that. I think that's a well taken point. So then I'm happy to rescind for the moment and say approval of the agenda.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments, just clarifications as well.
Yeah.
So we're going in to decide if we are going to allow statements that were made in closed session to come out into open session. Are we waiving, do we waive privilege on the whole closed session? Do we waive privilege on these particular statements? How does that actually work if we're looking to waive privilege? So that's my first question. What's the process for that? Do each of us say, well, I'd like to waive privilege on this statement? Can I get an agreement on that? And someone else will say, well, I'd like to waive, so process is my first question, obviously.
Just for clarification, I want to make sure I'm getting what you're saying. You're asking, can you selectively decide things that are released into the public or not versus wholesale? Okay.
How does that work?
Okay.
How does that work?
Understood.
And I don't believe that needs to be in closed session. I think the public has a right to know how process works. They don't need to know what the content of the process is, which leads me to my next point. Of course, I had a lot of problems with the way this closed session was called and the reason it was called, the unwillingness of the city manager, the city attorney, or whomever to reschedule, even though I recently had hip surgery and was only informed on a Sunday night about a Tuesday 9 a.m. session with a holiday in between, which leads me to my next point, and my denial of a reschedule would assume that this was absolutely imperative, as it was turned around in no time at all with no notice to the public. That, to me, that screams secrecy. That screams a whole bunch of things. Legal, yes, which leads me to my next point. I found the city attorney's defense in the paper of using a safe harbor. I don't know if you remember your pledge, Matt, but your pledge was we would not use that anymore, because that was one of our pledges to the district attorney. That was one of our pledges to ourselves, and no one is holding you accountable to that. I will hold you accountable to that, that you said you would not be using safe harbor. I doubt that this closed session comes anywhere near warranting complete secrecy about what the issue is. I would doubt that. But yet, once we get it, we don't even know what the closed session's about. Maybe you guys do. I don't know. How can I approve a closed session when I have no idea what it's about? Yet, when we get in there, it falls on us. We have heard the city manager come out and say, well, I was just doing what council directed. We are put in a position of being deeply at risk because of this safe harbor that I believe to be absolutely unnecessary. The third will be, I will put into a legal notice about, not a legal notice, but protocols. It clearly says you need 3 votes. The city manager's contention that we've done it in the past on 2, that I think was your mistake. It was the last for the pickleball. The time before that, we did do 3. And the ability, I know that the city attorney believes that the council has the right to override the protocol document at will. I forget exactly what's required for that, but I have issues with that as well. Why have protocols if you could decide at will that you're not going to follow them with a simple majority? And finally, I will say one thing. If there is no good reason to be in closed session, there can only be a bad reason. And so I consider this to be a bad reason. And finally, my final point, I have no idea what the closed session is, but I can kind of imagine. I want to let my council members know, the city attorney know, the city manager know, the public know, that my refusal to recuse myself is not because I'm denying that I have a benefit, a financial benefit in it. It is that I also believe fully, firmly that Councilmember Whitman is common law biased. And if I need, I've read a lot about it. It's pretty much a normal person's standard. If a normal person would read this and assume that such was the case, then a judge, that's the standard the judge uses. This council may decide that that standard doesn't work for them, but my only position is I will not leave the room when I believe that there is a fully biased person in that room. Thank you.
So it seems to me where we're going to stand is you're making the case. Oh, sorry, thank you.
Mr. Whitman, you're making the case that there's things that we can go over in the closed session that need to be done in the closed session. And that then the intention I'm hearing from Ms. Lang and myself is the intention is to be public, but we need to understand the details of what is being discussed.
Well, no, we need to receive advice from our attorney as to whether going public is the right way to approach that. And then we'll make a decision about whether we go. Oh no, you know, it'll be a majority rule about whether we go public or not.
Yeah, that just goes without saying.
I don't think that we should go into closed session now because one of our council members was told that there would be no meeting, and I would like, if I can, to propose that we not have council members, communicating, including the mayor, communicating about, scheduling what's on and what's off. That really has to go through the city manager or the clerk or because now we have a misunderstanding, and I know that Ms.
Just to be
Lang,
clear, it wasn't a scheduling question. It was a question of concern about the process and stating not intending to come. So that's not a scheduling question. That's an intention declaration.
Well, okay. The message was that there wouldn't be if you sent the same one to her, there wouldn't be a quorum. I didn't see that until I sat down here, but apparently Kim did, and because of that didn't show up. So if we could reschedule a closed session on the terms that we've just talked about, within the next few days so that we can, because there's a bunch of steps that have to take place, which is why it was set on a quick schedule.
And if we do, I support that decision. I wouldn't want to have this meeting without Councilmember Mang. I would also request that if there is a way to write the agenda to where we include the bringing this out into the open waiving privilege, if we could include that as a separate agenda item. So have two agenda items, one being waive privilege, and then we have the liberty to talk about all the different implications for that and what that would mean.
I second that.
Yeah, I agree that we should reschedule to allow Councilmember Mang to be present. I don't agree with having closed sessions, isolating and excluding one council member. And finally, I know that we want to get our city attorney's advice, but I will point out that he has been terribly, terribly, terribly wrong, as has been indicated by the DA.
Point of privilege.
Yeah, we hear that.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm just saying that when we point and we say that we're going to listen to this, we have to take into account past decisions.
That's always the case, though,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
We always weigh all the advice given, right?
Okay.
And, and just for this record, there has been some terribly, terribly wrong statements about what the DA said about who violated the law.
And you made
Fair
them.
enough. But we're not getting into it right now, are we?
Yeah.
So it sounds like what I'm hearing is we want to reschedule.
Yes.
And I think that would be good. I would love the public to have as much notice as possible so that they can come. I think that is always something we would want to do. That's just in our best interest and in the public's interest.
So if Matt renotices the same way and then adds to it also discussion about what should be made public, does that satisfy what you guys are looking for?
There's one thing that is unclear for me that's difficult, and that is that, like, our week is almost, we're into our week already in a short week. So when you say it's urgent, the problem that I'm having is I don't understand the urgency because I don't understand what it is. And what I'm hearing from you is you will tell us in closed session why it's urgent. So that's the part that's a little difficult.
Matt can talk.
Okay.
The heart of it is to have the closed session discussion in full is in closed session. We would need majority direction in a closed session to waive privilege to put everything on the open session agenda.
No,
So-
I totally hear that. I'm saying I don't understand the urgency. I didn't understand it for this one.
There's a certain deadline coming up in one of the related court cases that if the council wished to participate, that deadline runs Monday. The council could always seek to ask for forgiveness later if we can't meet between now and Monday, but that's the issue.
I'm presuming you mean the Vinskas case. I mean, I don't know what other cases there are. So if the participation is our question and our urgency is we want to participate in that case, that's the urgency?
No,
Oh.
the question is whether
Uh-huh.
we have a discussion.
Okay.
Do we want to remain silent in
Uh-huh.
that case,
Mm.
or do we want to state what our position is
I see what you're saying. And so the
as a
urgency.
city?
So the urgency you're feeling is there's a deadline if we want to participate in that case. That's the urgency. Did I get you right, Mr. Whitman?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in the regular order, yes.
So what I heard was the question is whether or not we want to participate in the Vinskas case. And I'm assuming that's the Byrne versus Rule case when you're talking about the Vinskas case, since
Yes.
that's the only case that's available.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. I just said that because I don't know of any other cases.
So we're going to weigh in whether or not the city wants to participate or do an amicus brief or whatever in the Vinskas case. Is that correct? So, well, isn't that interesting? Because that's a little bit, Okay. And I will say, Matt, that you have a vested interest in this. You have a vested interest in how this plays out. So,
Well, let's stick to the facts.
well,
I
the
mean-
fact is he does have a vested interest. The facts, okay, so that's the question. Once again, I have an issue with our city attorney being the one who leads this discussion. I absolutely have a problem with that, and I think the rest of the council should also have a problem with that.
I think right now we're talking about
Yes.
scheduling.
Yeah,
not
yeah,
who's leading the
let's,
discussion.
yes. And this is the conversation that we would
Yep.
have, that we have to discuss waiving privilege on, and there are a lot of things we can't say in open because they have been said in closed session.
My difficulty is that it's the same thing that if we have a consultant whose timeline is running out, so we're going to schedule our whole agenda around their grant running out, that's the tail wagging the dog, in my opinion. So I'm not understanding the urgency again, so that it would be better if the public could have more notice, and the week is running out for me, so that would be difficult for me. All we need is a quorum, of course, but we're running out of days if it has to be this week.
Well, I think all we can do is ask for the scheduling. We don't have Ms. Mang here, so we can't pick a date
I don't know
or a
her schedule.
time. And
Staff will make
makes
anything work, but
you know, in the normal course, the city manager would attempt to get a hearing date as quickly as he's able to.
Yeah, I would suggest reasonably though. So in other words, you would look at what are the circumstances around the request and understand then what's the reasonable response. So that's what I'm wondering about here is we haven't discussed whether or not, and we're acting as if I guess we want to consider that as a serious possibility is what I'm hearing you say. How difficult is it to get an extension if that, I'm just trying to open up the possibilities. Is that normal for the course of these things, Mr. Summers? It's possible to
if
say.
one has a good reason with the Court of Appeal, then one can sometimes get an extension. It depends on the panel. It depends on the case.
Mm-hmm.
I can't guarantee it,
Well,
but it also depends on, we could always, well, I need majority votes to do anything.
right. I'm eager to, obviously we'll reschedule, but I'm not eager to say it has to be this week. I haven't been convinced of that yet.
Availability this week is very, very limited. I already rescheduled today to make this, which meant that it had to be rescheduled. So I'm wondering if the council is willing to move forward with a quorum, even if I'm not willing to, or I don't have the ability to make the scheduling for this week. You know, I am in recovery from hip replacement on Thursday. It's tricky for me, obviously. Yeah. Okay. So that's
I hear you.
the way that is. I've already squeezed and pushed and squeezed, and I'm sorry, the city
Okay.
not dealing with this.
No, you're clear. I'm hearing you. What's your feeling, Ms. Lang?
My feeling is that that I would be open today. I pushed 4 different meetings to be here, so I will do that again if I need to. My priority when I signed did the oath and took the oath and took this office, accepted this office, was to be available and to do my best to be here. So I will. And I don't know the timing considerations, but I'm amenable.
I'm amenable as well. I just did not understand the details, and now that I do understand more, it's I'm still questioning the urgency, not the meeting itself.
Yeah, I think it would be inappropriate for us to go forward without Kim Mang, as a lot of what we're meeting about was generated based upon a conversation I had with her.
Okay, great.
So I think we need to schedule it as quickly as we can.
Okay. Seems like we're still in
I
this very
think
open
it falls on
situation.
me to call everybody and find out what their schedule is. I don't think it's appropriate to get everybody's schedule right now when one of the people who we need to
Yeah.
schedule with isn't
Right.
here.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the next step.
Agreed.
So I will send out an email
Mhm.
to everybody, and you can just reply to me individually, and then I can see where the
Okay,
dates align.
thank you.
I do have a question. What is the process for requesting recusal by the city attorney? Like, what is that process? How does that happen?
You mean of the city attorney?
Of the city attorney,
Mhm.
recusing the city attorney from,
So that,
yeah.
if I could just jump in, that's going to
Please.
require majority direction.
Is that's done in open session?
No, closed session.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So I think we have a next step. Yeah. Okay. Anything else needed?
If anyone was here to take public comment, we should take public comment. We did open a meeting. I don't think
It
any
wasn't on
cards
the
were submitted.
agenda.
No, for the special item we're not discussing.
Oh, I see.
But I don't think anybody submitted cards.
Mayor, we have one raised hand on Zoom from Starchild.
Thank you.
So let's take Starchild.
Sure.
I'm speaking to you now. Give you permissions to unmute and speak, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Much of what I had to say is changed now that I know a little bit about what is proposed. One thing I want to say is that the section that was noticed today for the meeting in the code talks about initiating legislation. It's based on existing facts and circumstances. The legislative body of the local agency has decided to initiate or is deciding whether to initiate litigation. It doesn't seem to me that filing an amicus brief in the burn matter falls under initiating legislation. It seems to me that at its inception that this closed meeting was improperly noticed, and I hope that the rescheduled meeting is properly noticed. You may have another thing that I hope happens is that more than 24 hours notice is given. You may have noticed that there are no written public comments. I would have been happy to submit one, but I'm not sure that anybody was working on President's Day. Another thing I want to say is that there have been so many of these special session meetings. Little of what's happened in them, or in these closed session meetings, little of what's happened has been revealed to the public. And I hope that when you consider waiving privilege, that you do so broadly. I think all the facts should be on the table, anything that doesn't prejudice the city, so that we can understand what was happening. I think also that continuing to litigate and to spend city money and city time on this burn matter, on the question of indemnification, is really using up a lot of our resources, our time, our money. And there's so much more we can do for the city than use our time and money on endless litigation, on more strife, on more civil war. I hope this council can turn the page and stop and not participate in this sort of quagmire. And the last thing I want to say is just because something can be in closed session doesn't mean it has to be in closed session. And I feel like this whole discussion, the discussion that we just had in open session, it could have been in the notice. It didn't have to be pulled out bit by bit just because a closed session meeting wasn't going to happen today. It was finally leaked out what this meeting was about. That could have been noticed, and it could have been said to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Starchild.
That's all, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, it may be useful to clarify a couple of points on the record have been raised today.
Yes, please.
One is today's closed session agenda is completely lawful. We follow the safe harbor language, and it is incorrect that we were never going to follow the safe harbor language. We had talked about increasing transparency. Can you mute that? Thank you. We had talked about increasing transparency when it made sense and was inappropriate. For consideration of initiation of litigation, which includes considering whether or not to file an amicus brief or other litigation options. All of that is lawfully agendized under consideration of initiation of litigation, as was done on this agenda. The city's protocols allow any two council members to set an item for an agenda, which includes inherently the right to call a special meeting. If that is done and the majority ever disagreed with that, the majority can simply vote not to approve the agenda, as is happening right now. So there is always a check by the majority. The minority can set, or any two council members can set an item. That was done lawfully. This agenda was noticed with 24 and a half hours notice, which is lawful. We will reset the item once we know a date with the same language for the closed session item, and we'll sort out how to set the open session item as directed today. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification, Mr. Summers.
I just have to say, I completely disagree with the city attorney's interpretation of what our protocols say. And we did indeed pledge to only do safe harbor when it was absolutely necessary. That was a transparency pledge we made. And no amount of legal gymnastics changes that. An ACLU.
Leslie, you
Yeah,
said this
okay.
already.
I know, I said
Okay.
it, but apparently, I don't know. Are people
Well,
not hearing? It's so
no,
funny.
but-
Okay, you hear? Okay,
Yes, we
thank
got
you.
it. Yep. Okay. Are we good? All right, meeting adjourned.